Hi guys, in this section we will be talking about the integration architecture. When you have moved forward and start looking into the integration architecture, what are the non-functional requirements which you need to take care is what we are going to discuss very quickly here. But remember, even before you come to the integration architecture, you need to know what are the integration point, and we are not taking that functional part of it. Okay, so we know that the integration architecture or the integration points has been already identified, and then what are the things you need to take care in the integration architecture, considering the fact that there is an interface requirements, concurrency, globalization, and product vendor support. These are the few things which you generally, without any failure, you have to do these few things. Now let's move on. What is the, in this diagram, what I am trying to show you is, say this is a SOAP and REST, which is interfacing with the other systems, which is in the common services, common resource. So all the integration point is what you can see in this particular diagram. So this is talking about the service interfaces. Okay, what you see here, where SOAP and REST is the most usable thing these days. Earlier we used to use SOAP, nowadays we are using REST services. So all the APIs or the microservices, it's not always REST, it has a different architectural style to write it, but moving from SOAP to REST and then now the new microservices, ultimately all those other service interfaces are becoming an integration point for different system, whoever is using what. Now this interface requirement, you need to know within what time period you are going to give a response. Say for example, there is a system over here which is going to call this particular service and want the response back in 2 seconds, and that is the timeline what the customer is expecting. You cannot exceed that. Who is going to test? The benchmarking testing will be there, there will be different benchmark testing over different systems. Say for example, you are in the development, there will be one kind of testing. You are in, and when I say testing, what you are going to do? Okay, I am calling, this is my CRM system, say for example, which is a customer relationship management system. You are calling this through SOAP and REST, or say for example, it is a REST service directly. You are going, and what is the CRM system expecting? Say you are fetching some data for customer 1, 2 and 3. Now this customer 1, 2 and 3 is fetching some information through a REST service or a SOAP service, whatever it is, and you want that service to respond back in the CRM system in the front end, basically within 2 seconds. Otherwise the customer will run away. They don't want anybody to. Now there can be a CRM front end system and CRM backend system, right? We are talking about the front end system, whatever is getting interfaced or seen by the customer, right? And the backend people also will not like if something is coming back after say 5 minutes or 6 minutes or more than 20-30 seconds these days, isn't it? So that is one thing you have to take care in the interface requirements. Don't forget to take care of that. So those timelines, whether it is a old servlet container, you are dealing with a legacy system and you are contacting from a front-end system to the back-end services and returning back, those things you need to clear. And now there can be a messaging system which is replicating behind the scene and updating your systems. When I say for example, this CRM system after fetching some data will go to a data warehouse system. Now how it will go? It has a messaging interface. This is just for an assumption. Okay, there is a messaging system in between. The messaging system keeps on triggering messages in the form of XML. It is going and putting it into the messaging services, and that messaging services in turn is pushing data into the database. Okay, now when this is happening, in a day there can be 100,000 customers who is updating this, and there is 200,000 messaging which got generated because of these services. Now when you are pushing these messages, what is the timeline of the messages push? Now whether your system is able to consume that message within a certain period. Say for example, if each message takes 5 minutes to 10 minutes just for one consumption, it can take a whole day just to consume, not a whole day, many days basically, to consume 100,000 messages, isn't it? So that is another thing which comes in the interface requirements. How much time this interface, if the interface is down, what is the message your guys is going to give? It is not a part of the functional. If the interface itself is unavailable, what happens to that? If the interface is going to call another interface and then respond back to you, whether the interface is a synchronous response, whether the interface is an asynchronous response, those sort of things is coming under the non-functional requirement in the integration architecture. So don't forget that in integration architecture, interface requirement and the related thing, whatever I have mentioned here, has to be taken care. So whether it is a messaging service, whether it is a mail service, whether it is a document service, whether it is a fax server, whether it is a business reporting, everything has to be taken care, and how it is traversing between different systems. Now in the database part I have already said, and we can cover this if there is any more part here, but in general you need to take care of that. At the same time, when you are in the integration architecture, you also need to take care of the concurrency. Now what is concurrency? Now most systems involve activity or flows that occur simultaneously, isn't it? I mean, say for example, that handles, say a system is handling user interacting at the same time, or system performing a large parallel job. Now in the CRM, just now what I was mentioning, you are having 100,000 customers accessing the CRM system on the front end of the CRM system at the same time. Okay, now at that point in time, they are concurrently accessing this service. They can concurrently access the database, right? Now whether you have taken care of those sort of things, that how the concurrent flow in the system will be interacting to each other, is what concurrency is all about. Now this concurrent user activity, you can also do testing through concurrency testing. You can understand that how much your system is supporting, and you need to also consider that the concurrent flow might affect the system performance. You can't scale. Say for example, if one person is waiting, if it is a serial call to the database, when you are going to the database, you are locking the database, retrieving the database, and the results is coming up, then what happens is the results take a long 20 seconds, 30 seconds or more than a minute to respond back to the system. So what I am saying here is, you need to remember that this concurrency has to be taken care, and how much bottleneck it is creating due to the capacity constraint is what you need to remember. And these bottlenecks can be heavily impacting the system. So don't underestimate the concurrency part of it from the non-functional viewpoint, and start looking into what kind of things you need to cover in this concurrency. And the next part, we can talk about the globalization. Now what is this globalization? As I said you, that a system which is getting accessed, say for example, from the design and usability viewpoint, you can think of it. Okay, now generally when we are designing system from past 10 years at least, I would say, we have different attributes of the system to get considered, isn't it? And one of the key thing is the design and usability. Although we are talking it in the integration architecture, but this also comes as a feature of a design and usability. Okay, so we need to factor those as a part of the system architecture or integration architecture, that whether it is a globalized call. You cannot think of calling a response which is written in French language and you are querying the system in English language, isn't it? So those part also need to be carried over, and start looking at how many locals can your system support. So you need to engage all the designers on the project to ensure that the system architecture can meet the design and usability requirements. In particular, identify any cross-cutting concerns early and be sure to address them. Designers often create high fidelity prototypes by using tools such as Envision and Figma. Okay, so you need to remember this, and you can use those prototypes to derive some of the designs and usability requirement for the system. So this is what I wanted to tell you on the globalization part. Now, what is the product vendor support? The last one in the integration architecture, what I generally consider and I recommend to you to consider is the product vendor support. Is, you know, to understand, say you are dealing with a third party product, say for example guideware, or you are dealing with Duckrix, or you are dealing with DocuViewer, any other third party product which is not at least owned by you. Now, when you are doing an interfacing, say for example you are giving a call from the service layer to the third party product. When you are giving that call to the third party product, what happens? Say for example there is a serialization issue and you need to upgrade the optimizer in the database to make sure the results are coming properly. Now, to do that, basically you need a product vendor support. You can't do that. This is not your product. So the third party products, like as I mentioned, are not in your control. So from the vendor support viewpoint, what are the key considerations you need to keep? If the vendor is not responding, if there is an error in that side, how your system is going to deal with that is what you need to mention and quote in this particular section. Hope I have explained you that what are the things you need to consider in the integration architecture from the viewpoint of interface, concurrency, globalization and product vendor support. Let's move on and go to the next section.